Hey, last time we were working on the old box, I mentioned about the dovetails, about sanding up polyurethane. That's what I was gonna do. We had put the hinge on, the box part, and we'll attach it to the lid after we finish the lid. But there's a lot we've got to do on the lid to really make it pop, make it outstanding. But what I did want to show you was the difference between dovetails and miters. If you look at the dovetails, and this is a great example, you notice the surface, now this has just been polyurethane, but you notice the difference in terms of the color, the end grain, how much darker the end grain of the dovetail is as opposed to the surface. And that's what I think really looks cool. You can't see how the bottom is attached. This is the bottom that was already polyurethaned and waxed. I did that on both surfaces. And this surface actually looks almost as cool as this one. Actually, I kind of like this one, maybe even a little bit better. But this is now going to be finished. 3 coats, 4 coats on the outside. And it's easy to polyurethane something and finish it on the outside. The tricky part was the inside, but we already took care of that like we do with the picture frame, so we don't have to worry about that. What I want to do now is I'm going to go back over to the glue table. I'm going to break down what I glued up earlier. Then what I want to do is I want to cut it to size, then sort of figure out exactly what I want to do to it to make it look pretty sharp. So I'm going to take this, maybe I'll just, let me leave this on the joiner. Take a walk over to the glue table, but I have to remember some measurements. Do you remember how long my box was? Maybe it's a good idea to measure it before I make a mistake. Oh, measure twice, cut once. Well, usually I measure 6 times and cut about 9 times because I'll make a mistake anyway. Now, if I take this measurement, the measurement of 13 inches, which I have written up on my board, does stick out in my mind. The thing that's important to realize is that I believe boxes should not have a top that's exactly the same size as that box, that outside the measurement. This measurement of 5 7/8 by 13, if I made a box lid exactly that size, you're assuming that this hinge is going to fit on there absolutely perfect. Because if it's off just a little bit in one corner, it's going to be off on all 3 corners. You can't be off at all. So if I were to do this and I wanted to make a box that's exactly this size, I would have glued a lid onto this already and then cut it off to make the box that size. If I'm doing this and I'm making a regular box, which I'm comfortable with, I always think overhangs are the way to go. I'm gonna have a 1/2 inch overhang on the front of this. I'm gonna have a 1/2 inch overhang on these sides, and I'm gonna have it flush to the back where I could see the pin of the hinge. That's what I wanna see. So the overall size of my top is gonna be, this is 5 7/8 wide by 13. The overall size of my top is gonna be 6 3/8 by a 1/2 inch on this side, by 14. So that's what I'm going to do is I'm going to take that, break it down from the clamp, scrape it up, and I'm going to cut it to that exact size, 6 3/8. Oh, but I remembered, I made this box to fit the wood that I had. It's already 6 3/8. So all I have to do is really square it in, cut it to length, and then figure out exactly what I want to do in terms of how I want to make that thing stand out. So let me go over to the glue table. I watch these videos and I notice that my head, as someone would say, is like hangdog, like this, because I'm always working down below. If I'm washing the dishes, everything is down below. I'm gonna keep my neck and back straight so that when I walk, I'm a little bit more military and a little less hangdog. Here's a piece that I glued up the other day. If I feel this, it feels exactly even. You know why? I scraped it before you guys got here. But if you remember, I had one of those big deep throw clamps on the center of this, which really did help because it is very, very much even. I'm going to flip it around, loosen the clamps up, and check out how this side is. Uh-oh, there's some black in there. And the question is, what is that black from? It's a chemical reaction of the glue and the steel that's on the clamps. That sometimes is an issue. As a matter of fact, that little stain might be an issue if you didn't scrape it up right away. Now this is still kind of rubbery, so it's still wet. So if I take my paint scraper, I told you that's my most used piece of equipment in this shop, and I scrape this down, try to even it out. I could usually get that black off. Usually. Now, if you notice, this side has the waviness of the oak, but if you notice, the color doesn't look as good. If you look at this color here, which is darker than this, you can definitely tell it's two separate boards. But on the other side, when I flipped it over here and I thought this was the side that looked the best, it kind of does look like one. That's exactly the point. I want to make this look like it's one board. Remember, when this box is closed, I'm only going to see the other side, the underside of that lid, as many times as this thing is opened. So right now, I'm comfortable with this. I really like the way this top surface came out. What I did was I scraped that little black from the clamp before you guys got here so you didn't notice it. Let's cut this to the size it has to be. I said to you it had to be 6 3/8. And I just want to double check because I think that other piece was a little bit less, or the box came out to be a little bit less than 5 7/8. So if I look at that, that is 6 3/8. And I know both of these are machined edges, so I'm in good shape with that. We just want to cut this piece to 14 inches long. So do you remember how to do this? I hope. What I'm going to do is I need a tape measure. I need my pencil, safety glasses. And I wonder if I need a square. I think I do. I think I do. Let's come over here to the old miter saw. And I have, again, more decisions to make. So this piece has to be 14 inches long. Boy, I hope it is at least. Yep, it's about 14 and a half. So I'm going to get rid of a 1/2 inch on one of these ends, either this end or this end. Which end do I want to keep? That blends out pretty well. I like these colors. Cameraman, any thoughts? You want to get rid of this end? You want to keep this end? Okay. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to measure this and cut it to 14 inches. So I'll take my tape measure, put it right on the end to 14 inches. We'll put a mark. We'll take a tri-square, draw a line, and then just cut it to 14 inches and we'll be done, right? Wrong! Wrong! It's not right. I don't just cut it to 14. Why? If you look at this end, this is not a squared end. Remember, cut to a workable length, square an end, and cut to length. This end right here is off. So what I want to do is I have to square an end. I have to get a point that I can measure from. So in order to do that, I need to cut a little bit off of this end and then take my measurement 14 inches from that squared end. I need to get a reference point that I can measure from. It never changes on any single piece that you ever work on in this shop. You're always going to square an end and then cut it to length. If you look at a board and the board looks pretty close to being square, you can check it with a square, tri-square. Usually what I tell you to do is don't trust anybody. There could be sawdust up against the fence. It could be off a little bit. You square the end up yourself first, and that way you know it's ready to go. I'm all set. What I did was I moved this miter saw to 90 or 0 because it was set at 45 degrees before. So the question is, how much do I want to take off? I want to take off as little as I possibly can from this end. And I'm going to cut it. I'm going to cut off of this end. Is that the end you said? Oh, square this end up. I got it. Thank goodness somebody else is here. Look at the waviness of that oak, how cool that looks. What I'm gonna do is, I'm gonna measure this to a certain, no, I'm not gonna measure it. All I have to do is bring the chop saw down and cut it. I can't cut off this much because if I square the end and cut that much off, it's gonna be short. So what I wanna do is I'm gonna move this over until the board comes right about close to the middle of that curve. Left hand, all the way over to the left. I'm trying to sneak over while the cameraman's getting a close-up. I forgot my square. I'm gonna need that for my second cut. What I'm gonna do, flip everything around. Why are my keys on me? Safety glasses on, sleeves rolled up. Square this end. Okay. Cameraman has a change of heart. She says, this end's got the waviness, let's keep this, let's get rid of this end. To me, it doesn't really matter. It's gonna be cameraman's box. Here we go. Butt it up against the fence. Dog tag on the other side, left hand all the way to the left-hand side. Slowly move it in until it's about midway into that saw curve. Right hand on the handle, bring it slowly down. Nobody's around? Nope, nope, good. This is now a squared end, exactly 90 degrees. And because of that, the shop teacher is going to put an X on that end. And I don't think it's going to be confusable with that end, right? So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to measure from the squared end. We said 14 inches. Take the end of the tape measure. The reason why there's an X there is you can put the tape measure right on the end of the X. We put a mark at 14. I put a little mark at 14. I'm going to take my combination square. Because these edges have been machined, I did it, and they're parallel to each other, but the tri-square up against there. I'm sorry, the combination square. Combination square. I draw my line. I'm going to cut again. I never cut on the line. I always cut to the line. So I'm going to leave that line as I make the cut. After I make the cut, my piece is going to be the size that I need it to be, and then we'll talk about what I want to do with this. Left hand, bring the board over. I'm going to bring the saw down so that the saw blade is slightly to the right-hand side of that line. And again, the lighting in here is so awful. I'm just taking a guess with a lot of things. By the way, I looked in the mirror, the lighting is so bad in here. I looked in the mirror and I was good looking. How about that? Oh boy, talk about shadowy. Yeah. Curly oak is tough. That stuff is definitely older. That's old grain material. Take a look. How did I do? This is the litmus test. Can you see the shadow of a pencil line? I certainly can. That piece is not cut to anything less than 14, so it now should go over my box, and I should have an overhang on the front, the two sides, and it should be flush to the back. You want to check that out? Where's my box? All the way back to the table saw. Let's take a walk. Oh, head up. Yep. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm back. Here's my box. Here's my lid, which looks really cool. Butt that down, slide it back. I can feel a 1/2 inch on the front, a 1/2 inch on either side. And how cool does the pin of that, oh, sorry.
Maybe not so cool.
Yeah, all right, don't be a wise guy. Everybody's a comic here, right? Even the Canadian comic. How cool does that look, that pinned on the hinge? I think it looks really sharp. So now what I want to do is I'm going to do something to make that lid stand out. And here's what I think I'm going to do. I had a piece of Purple Heart. The Purple Heart that I have had a strip that was cut off of it. What I think I'm going to do is put an inlay of Purple Heart on this oak. And the thing that looks really cool, and I do this with the clock project, which we might work later on in the future, I'm going to cut a groove along the outside surface and a groove along the outside end of that surface. So it's going to look like a checkerboard. I'll have a line of Purple Heart that's going to be this width. We'll put one there. We'll put one here. We'll crisscross them, put one here, and put one here. So that would look pretty cool, right? It would for a normal man, but you're not looking at a normal man. Here's what I'm going to try to do, and I'll try to make these cuts today. I'm going to cut a groove going along the grain, a groove, a dado, a dado. Then what I'm going to do is I want to flip it around and I want to do the same thing from the underside. So when you open it up, it has the same inlay. But what I'm going to try to do on this, because I did this once or twice before, is if I can cut a groove on the end and a groove on this edge and then put a little piece of inlay there, it looks like the inlay goes all the way through the entire project. And it looks like this little corner piece was individually glued on as a piece of oak. That's what I think I want to do. Again, if this is your project, I look at this, I take it over to the old router table, I maybe bullnose this, sand it up, I'll show you how to attach it, but I'm going to get a little bit more tricky and show you the things that you can do. I have cut grooves in here before and just put the inlay on the top and it looks okay, but this would be kind of cool and make it look like it's a little bit more challenging and maybe stand out. In order to do that, I'm going to have to set up the dado head. To set up the dado head, if you remember, I'm going to go over to the power box and I'm going to shut the power off. Why am I doing this? Because most kids in my class say, "You don't do that. You just act like you do that." Well, I do it. I just did it, right? Oh, yes. I'm going to set up a 1/4 inch wide dado. And I'm going to tell you right now that I think that this is a little bit more than a 1/4 inch wide dado. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take this piece, after I cut my groove around everything, I'm going to surface this piece down so it fits absolutely perfect. Because I know if I tried to cut this with my saw, it might fit really well in certain spots. Other spots, I don't know that it's going to fit very well. So let's break this down and we'll put the old dado head on. What I'm going to do is I'm going to set it up so I just use 2 blades. I'll move the saw fence out, 7/8 open end wrench, and I want to try to do this quick. Why? Because you don't care about doing this, do you? You'll just tell your teacher, "Can you set up the dado head?" Well, you should be able to do this. Remember, this is a left-hand threaded nut. I take the nut out, I take the washer out. Saw blade is here. I'm going to put the saw blade on something that's wood. Little cough. I'm going to use the 2 dado blades. Remember, the teeth have to face towards me. Here's that guy. Oh, sounded like the fire alarm just went off. It was just the ding of the saw blades. Washer and nut. Remember I said to you guys, this is the only nut that I have. A table saw nut that I have, by the way. So I don't want to drop this into that massive pile of sawdust, although he just cleaned out the sawdust because he's been cleaning the shop. So there is my dado head on. I can't use this throat plate, it's too narrow. So what he'll do is he'll get the wider throat plate, and then we got to make some cuts. Here's something to think about. I'm going to have this groove equidistant around everything. I'm going to maybe move it in, I don't know, 1 inch in from the edge. 1 inch in, 1 inch in, and 1 inch in from here. Something like that. I think that would look cool. The other thing that I have to keep in mind is I'm going to cut the grooves on the top and the bottom. This board is only 5/8 of an inch thick. So what I want to do is I want to cut a groove, but I only want to go in maybe about 1/4 of an inch or so. So it's not going to go in very deep, but I'm going to go around all 4 sides and the ends and the edges of all those pieces. So what I want to do is I want to make sure that this saw blade isn't raised up too high. If it is, I'm going to be cutting all the way through the entire project. So if I look through here, that looks like it's about 1/4 of an inch. I'm going to make it a little bit less because I really don't want to make a mistake and screw this up. I'm going to go in about that far. I said to you I'm going to go in about 1 inch from the end, or I'm sorry, 1 inch from the edge, which means I'm going in 1 inch from the end as well. So I'm going to set this to about 1 inch. Let's see what that looks like. Let's see, I got a piece of scrap wood here. Let me turn, oh, I can't turn it on. Chortle, chortle. Look, you still got it. Look, take that jumper, right? Always move it with your hands up, right? Step in, draw the foul. Yep. I'm going to see where 1 inch looks like on here. Pop, pop, pop. And I'll give you an idea of what it's going to look like. So I'm going to cut something like that on all 4 on the surface around the whole thing, the top side and the bottom side. The thing that's going to be tricky is I'm actually going to cut it this way and I'm going to cut it this way as well. So it's going to have a notch out here, a notch out here. I'll take the Purple Heart, stick a little piece in there, a little piece in here, and then have these pieces go over top. So it's going to be a little bit involved. Let's make the cut. I think that was pretty good. Right? It's going to come up to about there. I think it looks cool. Let's go for it. I'm just going to cut the bottom side first. And let me check to see how this works. So I have maybe about 5/16 left over. But the idea is for me to put my inlay here, so it looks like it goes all the way down. But you would see that little notch out. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to use my miter gauge, stand this bad boy up, and I'm going to cut it this way. So I'm going to put a piece of Purple Heart there and then cover it up on this side. I'm going to do the same thing over here. Everybody got that? I'll do the ends and then I'll do this edge last. And just as I did the end, I'm going to do these edges too. It doesn't like to cut on the end and edge. It makes a funny noise. But you can kind of get an idea of what this is going to look like now. So it's going to look like that piece, and these pieces are all floating. Do you think I'll be able to do this? No? I don't either. But I'm going to tell you right now, and I say this to you all the time, you don't know until you try it. And I could fail with this, but I'll learn from it, and then I'll take that and move on, and it might make me more determined to do it again. But come hell or high water, I'm going to find a way to do this, and it's going to look good. And my last cut will be on that surface. Let's get a push stick on here. And I don't want to hear, oh, he's doing it because he's the teacher. You can do it too. The difference is nobody wants to do it because it's too much. Cover your ears. It's a 4-letter word. Work. So that's what I'm going to have. My Purple Heart hopefully doesn't fit in here. Nope, it's too tight. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut this and then put these in all these inlaid pieces, all those grooves. I'm going to put it on the corner, this edge right here and this end over there first, and then I'll overlap this. So this is going to take a little bit of work, and I want to surface this down so it fits in absolutely perfect. But I think that'll be a really cool way to stand off the top. How about a question for today? What's going to be your question? To make a 1/4-inch wide dado, how many chippers and blades do I need? When I set this up to cut a 1/4-inch wide dado, how many chippers did I use and how many blades? Do you remember? Do you know what a chipper is? Do you know what a blade is? Think about it. Correct answer? I know what you're going to do is you're going to fast forward to the end of this video so you get the answer. You don't have to watch the rest of it. I'm not going to tell you. You tell me how many chippers and blades I need to make a 1/4-inch wide dado. The fun part starts next time with that inlay. You guys have a great evening and look forward to seeing you again.